What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining Jets Talk Now. I'm Paul Fiore. Please click like and subscribe, as we are now over 800 subscribers, which is just awesome. Wanted to hop on Friday afternoon as the New York Jets have released their first round interviews for defensive coordinator. And I think what's important here is, if I'm being fair, I've been very critical of the noise being no noise. Just aside from Wink Martindale, we had heard about Durante Jones. I think earlier today we heard about Matthew Arroyo from the Dolphins, kind of leaked out, and then the Jets released their entire list, which consumes 8 candidates, right? And I'm going to pull it up here and share with everybody. And we can talk through it. But the Jets, we have Dolphins, DB, Coach Arroyo. You have Ephraim Banda from Cleveland, DeMarcus Covington, Chris Harris, who's the interim DC for the Jets, Jim O'Neill, who has obvious familiarity with Aaron Glenn, both on the same, he'd worked for Glenn on Detroit staff. Wink Martindale, Durante Jones, we had previously talked about from Minnesota. And then the big name, which is Jim Leonard. And so, the Jets deserve credit. They got 8 people to come in for interviews, but 5 of these 8 we did not know about. So they were very quiet and under the covers. And, if we just dive a little bit into each one of these guys from the Jets website themselves, Arroyo spent 4 seasons with the Dolphins, kind of assistant DB coach in 22. He became the cornerbacks coach in 2024. So, not an inspiring name in a lot of ways. The Dolphins kind of a meh defense, secondary average-ish. So, younger guy, I mean, not much I don't have much to say too much on Arroyo. Banda, another relatively young guy, Brown safeties coach, 23 to 25, which, listen, the Browns defense is strong, right? So a guy like Banda is interesting because, he comes from a strong background on the defensive side under the Browns. And while again, I think most of us as fans, when you talk about names of people that are assistants on, good staffs, you kind of rely on the tree they're coming from. And so Banda coming from Jim Schwartz tree, I'm all for. And he's got a pretty good resume in general. So I like the Banda kind of a little bit in that banjo kind of, lexicon in my mind. Covington, really young. Now, he was the Packers D-line coach, run game coordinator, but previously he was with New England for a long time, and he was their DC in 24, which we all know how that was. Their defense was pretty awful in 2024. So, I don't know how much we want to hold against him in that way. But, prior to that, the Pats defense, you can see the rankings here. He was part of the defensive staff, kept number 3 in the league, total defense, pass defense, number 2 in interceptions. So Covington has an interesting resume. Younger guy at 36 years old. So we'll see. Chris Harris, we don't need to go through. We know who he is. Durante Jones, I've talked about before. Good tree, Minnesota Vikings, Brian Flores, complex, aggressive defense. I like that interview. I think what's good about guys like Jones and Jim Leonard, who's the big fish in this category, are guys that are coveted by other teams, which is what I've been asking for since we started talking about the Jets defensive coordinator opening. It would be, for me, if I'm ranking these, actually, let me just finish. After Leonard, we have Wink, kind of the grizzly old guy, big name, huge experience, and probably the most uninspiring hire personally. And then you have O'Neal. O'Neal was with the Lions this past year. He worked under Glenn the year prior. So, he was kind of another guy working in the secondary. He was he was a defensive assistant working with the safeties. And O'Neal is someone that I don't believe is getting other interviews for the defensive coordinator role. And he also is a former member of the Jets coaching staff. He was with the Jets from 09 to 12, the defensive quality control coach in 09, and assistant DB coach for 3 years as well. So, O'Neal's a bit of a familiar name for Glenn. And so if we just go back and look at these guys at the top, right? The most uninspiring hire is probably Chris Harris, just because there's nothing that he did that earned him the opportunity to become DC. And I think if he became DC, Harris would likely be the guy deferring to Glenn, and Glenn would be heavily involved in the play calling, which maybe you think that's okay. I personally don't want that scenario. I'm a much bigger proponent of them bringing in someone who could be an innovative defensive coordinator. So Chris Harris, I'm not excited by that. Jim O'Neal, same thing. So to me, it's like Chris Harris, Jim O'Neal would be Aaron Glenn's going to run the defense. That's what I think would happen if either one of those two guys get hired. Familiarity, continuity, those are positives. The negative to me is neither one of these guys are being interviewed by anybody for the job. I'd find them to be uninspiring hires, especially when you have a name like Jim Leonard on your list. Okay. Who else? Wink Martindale, I've talked about ad nauseum. Some people would love that hire. I would hate it. I think Wink runs a 3-4. He's out of the league. No one's interviewing him for a DC job. He runs dated schemes. Just not a fan. I think he'd give them an identity from a personality standpoint. I think it would run cold fast. Durante Jones, Banda, and Leonard. To me, those three are like the best names on this list. Why? All three come from great scheme, great kind of blood on the defensive side, right? You've got the Flores tree, the Jim Schwartz tree, and Denver. I mean, Vance Joseph tree. Those are three really solid defensive teams. Durante Jones is interviewing 4 other jobs. He is well liked around the league. I love Minnesota's defense in general and how they scheme. I would like that hire. I would feel good about that hire. I think the fans should feel good. Banda, I haven't heard his name bandied about by anybody else. But again, Browns, solid defense. Jim Schwartz, I mean, he was my top guy that I would want as the DC. So anybody off his tree and a guy that has a significant role in his defense, I feel good about. Younger, in his early 40s, bring it on, right? Like that's a swing I would take. Jim Leonard's the home run hire. Jim Leonard is highly coveted. He's interviewing for multiple jobs. Did he take the interview because of Muji and Glenn and his relationships and the Jets? Or is he really interested in the job? Time will tell. I don't want to get my hopes too high because like he was, my 1B to Jim Schwartz's 1A. But if listen, I've said this from the beginning. If Glenn nails this hire, I'll be the first to give him credit and props. Hiring Jim Leonard is nailing the hire. Okay. Hiring Durante Jones or Banda for me is a solid hire. Wink, Chris Harris, Jim O'Neill would be uninspiring, disappointing hires to me. And then Covington and Arroyo, I'm kind of undecided on. Covington spent a long time with New England. He's young. Not in love too much with kind of what I see. Arroyo, I don't see that one. I'm hoping that one's just, he's not in the final stages, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. But at the end of the day, they do deserve credit, right? The Jets deserve credit for operating in the shadows and doing the things that they said they would do. There's no leaks in the building, and this is a good first step. So for me, there's one home run hire on this list of 8. Jim Leonard stands above the rest. Durante Jones and Banda as the tier below that. Wink is probably the next tier below that just because of his experience. Harris and O'Neill, kind of the tier below that. And then the bottom would be Arroyo. I think that would be the bottom of the barrel on the hires because, the Miami Dolphins defense, I don't see the appeal of what he brings to the table. And at the end of the day, I want to see what are they running on the scheme and how involved is Glenn going to be on that side of the ball. And I really feel like if he hires Harris or O'Neill, it's really going to be Glenn calling the defense. And well, some people might think that's a really good idea. I don't know. Will he be overwhelmed as a head coach by also having to call the defense? I don't know. I'm torn. So that's the Jets update on the defensive coordinator role. Earlier today, I had a really awesome time. I got to be a guest on Jake Assman's show. Check it out. I'm trying to upload that video. I spent about 45 minutes with Jake. We covered a lot. We talked about defensive coordinator roles. And, I got a little egg on my face because I said, hey, if Jim Leonard had interviewed, we would have heard about it. Well, we didn't. So I give credit and props to the Jets for keeping that quiet. Although what's funny is Ricky Scoops had posted something about, intimating Jim Leonard and being tied to New Jersey. And I think everyone assumed it was the Giants, but maybe it was the Jets. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. So I'm semi-encouraged. Ultimately, at the end of the day, who's in the second round of face-to-face one-on-one interviews and who do they hire? So I'm going to give them credit today for where we are with this list. At the end of the day, you get judged by the end result of who you hire, and that's what I'm going to wait on, just to be fair. And then lastly, I would say my takeaway from my time with Jake today was really interesting, and I enjoyed it a lot. And like I said, we covered a lot of topics. One of the things that I came away with as we were talking that I was worried about, and I'm hoping we don't deal with, is with the Giants getting all the splashy news with Harbaugh, with the Jets not having the opportunity to draft a Dante Moore now, although I'm happy about, they got egg on their face in the media. You have to worry about Woody Johnson's psyche. And I know that sounds silly to say when you're talking about an adult human being, but Woody is a fragile human. He's a reactionary owner. He thinks thinking is overrated. He thinks it's okay to be at an owner's meeting and run the bus right over his starting quarterback. Even if you agree with what he had to say, you don't do that. It doesn't put the organization in a good light. Coming off of a 3-win season and empty seats everywhere, I worry a little bit that Woody Johnson gets reactionary now, and in an effort to get some back page, does a desperate thing and, hurts the future draft capital of this franchise and makes a swing for a Kyler Murray or somebody like that. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. My antenna is up, because usually when there are things that are happening around the league that make the Jets look bad, and especially if it has to do with the Giants, you worry about Woody and how he's going to behave, and will he allow things to just play themselves out. And a lot of fans are going to say, well, what is that going to get us? We're a terrible team. Well, what I mean by that is Aaron Glenn's getting year 2, whether you like it or not. Improve the roster through draft. Don't reach for quarterbacks. Don't do desperate trades. Don't spend stupid money in free agency just to try to get a big name in the building. You got to build this thing from the foundation. It's a young football team. Whether Aaron Glenn is the answer or not, you're going to know that by the midway point of 2026. If he's not, then you should be a very attractive job in 27 if you don't meddle, Woody. Because you'll have 3 first-round draft picks going into 2027 in a quarterback stack draft. You will have hopefully improved the roster with a lot of hopefully infuse it with a lot of young talent. And somebody will want to come here because if you can draft your own quarterback with a young, talented roster, you can build things and make this a long-term winning organization. When it becomes unattractive is panic moves in 26, losing draft capital for 27, and stories in the Atlantic talking about Woody meddling. If that's what 2026 brings, good luck trying to find a new head coach in 27 that wants the job. That's coveted, and not Rex Ryan. Okay, and I know there's Rex Ryan fans out there, but please, he hasn't. It's been a long enough time. Understand he's not going to be a head coach in the NFL. So that's where I'm at right now. We got DC news, which is great going into the weekend. I'm going to touch on this on a separate pod. Somebody I follow on X who I really enjoy and has been pretty good on information in the past did mention the possibility that the Raiders might be open for business when it comes to the first pick. We should, I'm gonna do a separate quick thing on that. I have my own personal point of view, which I've expressed multiple times. I've said from the beginning, no matter what, the Jets should pick up the phone and call the Raiders. This just kind of solidifies my viewpoint on that. Anyway, other than that, we have playoff football this weekend. Here's my view. I love Denver at home this weekend against Buffalo. As much as Josh Allen is the best player in football, best quarterback in football, and lifts his team up and overcomes what I think is a very average roster. Denver at home in that altitude with a really good defense that flies around and what I believe is a superior coaching staff to Buffalo. I'll take Denver in that game. So I like Denver at home, and I think they're a 1.5-point favorite. Seattle is 7-point favorites at home against San Francisco, which to me seems really high. And Darnold is evidently nursing an oblique strain, and we don't know if he's going to be 70%, 80%. I just think San Francisco is too good of a team, too well coached to be getting 7 points in this game. I'm not saying they're going to win. I'm taking the points all day long. So for me, Denver -1.5, San Francisco +7. Unfortunately, I have to just, instead of being my heart, I'm just going to say my mind tells me New England's going to beat Houston this weekend. They're a 3-point favorite at home. I think they cover. Houston's defense is insane. New England's defense is good. New England's got the coaching advantage. They have the immense quarterback advantage for me. CJ Stroud basically tried to hand the game to the Steelers. Steelers were like, no, thank you. I don't trust CJ Stroud in the playoffs. I just don't. So New England, to me, wins that game. And then the last game is my upset game. And it's crazy to me that I'm saying this because I was on the Rams wagon for a vast majority of this season. And my rational side says I still should be on that wagon because I love their team. I love their offense. I think they're a Super Bowl team. However, there's sometimes matchups that happen that I think are bad ones. The Rams having to go on the road in the cold to Chicago against a team that right now has nothing to lose, is playing with a ton of confidence, and a head coach that's really feeling himself, is a dangerous, dangerous spot. And I think the weather is going to be a factor. I like Chicago. They're getting 3.5 points. Maybe they don't win the game. I think they will win the game. But I would take the points in Chicago in that game. So that's my 4 games for the weekend. I guess let's see what happens. But I'll bump back on here if there's some other breaking news. We'll do a little Fernando Mendoza conversation just to continue to fuel that fire. And then after the weekend, we'll do a quick rundown on the games. So anyway, have an awesome weekend, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Check me out on Jake's show from this morning. I was on the very first segment, 45 minutes, trying to figure out how to upload that show onto my channel. But Jake's got 45,000 subscribers, so I'm only 800. You go right on Jake's show and you can see it. Hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys soon.